afternoon, everybody. I'm glad this worked. We're having a little trouble with Google Plus this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you may be. I'm going to put the new URL on here, so on the old event page, so everybody who goes there will understand that that's no longer working. I don't know what happened. It's never worked that way before, but let's just forget about it. And welcome to Lorrie Farrelly. Thank you so much for persevering with me in this little snafu. And welcome to your first Google Plus Hangout on Air Live. Tell us about you, Lorrie.
Well, thank you, Sally. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Lorrie Farrelly. I have kind of started a second career after I retired from teaching in writing. I had always loved to write, and I had now time to really write the stories that I had been wanting to write for a long time. And since I began in earnest, I've published 6 novels and several, through Prairie Rose Publishing, several anthologies of short stories. I write primarily romance of different types, Western historical, contemporary, but always with a little touch, and sometimes much more, of the paranormal, because I really love that.
So what part of the paranormal do you go into? Because I know that it's a very broad category, and people use werewolves and shapeshifters and vampires and all kinds of psi skills and other kinds of psychic events. So where do you put your paranormal lens?
Mine are, I'm not the vampire and werewolf person, although I love to read and watch movies and so forth with those in them. But I usually have either psi skills, ESP, telepathy, or beings such as angels, ghosts. That's where my books usually have their paranormal effects and events.
And is it like good guys and bad guys, so to speak, that have that going on, or do you have a different kind of decision about who gets to have the extra abilities?
Oh, it's usually the good guys.
And what are your favorite abilities to give your characters?
In one of my novels, the hero and heroine can read each other's minds. With other people, they are simply intuitive, and they were not aware that they would have this ability until they encountered each other, and it was rather a frightening experience for them at first, because it is quite a invasion of privacy, as you can imagine, to have your thoughts available to someone else.
Wow.
So
how did it happen? Was it like, did they get struck by lightning, or how did it be that they just could read each other's minds like that?
Well, the story begins when the young woman who has been the victim of a crime is at the police station, and she is in an observation room viewing some suspects in hopes of making an identification of the man who attacked her. And one of the men in the lineup, who is an undercover police officer, can see her through the one-way glass, and she can hear him. And of course, this is rather scary to both of them, because she's convinced that all of them can see her, and he cannot figure out why in the world he can hear this young woman. So it's a rather dramatic introduction for them to each other.
So you don't really explain it then, you just have it happen.
Right, and they are themselves both, they know they're intuitive, they know that they get feelings about situations and about people, that they can read people very well, but this is the first time that they have each met someone who is shares the same talents that they do. So
wow.
It's a process of growth for them too.
And so it's not like something right in their family and they're used to doing this, or they have friends who do this with them. These are each other's first experiences.
Yes, that's correct.
And so is that partly how you construct their romance, is because now they're both telepathically linked?
Yes, and that's a big part of it, but it is also somewhat frightening thing, because particularly for the young woman who is not used to much intimacy and it is very wary of intimacy, it's a difficult adjustment for her.
Wow. And so, do they have a way to what we call block or shield or set up boundaries, or is that just
They
not happening?
do, and they do, and they both of them pledge that they will not invade the other, that they will only uh, merge by invitation, that they
But
will.
do they really have that ability to curtail it when they're so new to using it? Like, that's usually the case where people who are new to it don't have much control, you know?
Right. She has more control than he does, because he's used to kind of probing situations to see what he can tell. She is a therapist who works with damaged children, children who have mental and emotional disabilities, and she does have ways to protect herself from too much invasion.
Oh. So in that case, is she kind of teaching him?
Very much, and she lets him know what her fears are, and part of his feelings for her is respecting what she asks of him in terms of the boundaries and not invading her thoughts. However, when they are sleeping, all bets are off. So,
Oh, because like they share
subconscious
dreams.
is so unguarded.
They share dreams and they have dreams that they walk in each other's dreams like that.
Yes, yes.
Oh, and are they a little bit romantic
Oh,
sometimes?
very, very.
So then they wake up and they know that this person or that person has been in their dreams, so to speak.
So it was a lot of fun to write. It really was a great deal of fun to write.
Awesome. And so what's the title of that one that has all that size stuff going on in it?
That book is called The Guardian's Angel.
The Guardian's Angel. Guardians with an apostrophe after the S. I love it when people use apostrophes correctly. Thank you so
Oh, that is just so my thing. What is
No, that's not always what happens, right?
I know. I'm every time I walk by someone's house and they have a sign that says the Smiths, Smith apostrophe S, I always think, the Smiths what? You know?
I know. I mean, don't you just want to go up with your red pen like all over the world and say, look, fix this, fix this, fix this.
It's the curse of the teacher. It's true.
It is. It is. And my son and I both have it, and my sister has it, and my other sister has it. I mean, it's just one of those things where we all have this curse, you know, and we can't help it.
It's absolutely true. And, you know, it's almost funny.
What is the most ridiculous thing that you found in your books that people don't realize is correct and they tell you to fix it? Has anybody done that?
My favorite of all times is the lady who was very upset that I had left, in a Western historical romance, that I had left horses out in the rain.
Ah!
So I have learned that they either all have to have little pink parasols, or I have to put them up at the Hilton next time.
No way.
She didn't seem to mind that I left the people out in the rain, too. But
Does
she
she
was
not
very
realize
concerned
that
for the
these horses are animals and that it's okay for them to be out in the rain?
Apparently in some places and in some people's minds it is not. But the horses themselves were quite fine with it.
Well, I mean, I know that if it's really cold and it's really wet, you know, what is that disease that horses get? Is that colic?
Horses are surprisingly delicate for their size.
Mm-hmm.
And colic is a stomach ailment that, yes, is frequent with horses. And so, you know, people think of them as big, sturdy animals, and when they're in good health, they are. But they are also susceptible, but not to ailments, I don't think, of being left out in a spring or summer rain. They seem to do just fine with that.
So I'm going to ask you, because you're a real horse lover, and I know you and I talked before we started about your work in a very special place with horses. Tell us about your work in Disneyland in California.
I worked at the Circle D Ranch, which is backstage at Disneyland, which is what they call the areas that the public doesn't see. And they have quite a large ranch there. There are about 25 draft horses, which are the large horses that you see pulling the streetcar. We also have a petting zoo, which has goats and goats and burros and a cow. We have the swans that swim in the moat outside Sleeping Beauty's castle. And there is a live cockatoo hanging over the Jungle River Cruise attraction. And all the animals are taken care of at the Circle D.
Oh my gosh. So you were there for how many years did you do this?
Oh, I was only there 1 year, but and for vacations, because I was teaching at the same time. So, and unfortunately, arthritis got me, and I couldn't do that heavy work anymore. But I'll tell you, I loved it while I was doing it.
And did you interact with the people that were visiting too, or were you more hidden away?
We're pretty hidden away, except when we would man the petting zoo. And then we're actually that's at the Big Thunder Ranch, and we're actually there out with the guests and, you know, speaking with them. And I did have one lovely little couple from overseas wanted to take my picture as a real American cowgirl. And I thought, if they only knew I'm just a real American high school teacher. But it was a great costume, so they got their picture of the real American cowgirl.
And so did you feel like they were just in this weird romantic trip and you just didn't want to spoil it for them?
Of course, and at Disneyland, the whole point of it is to make you feel that you are in a place that makes you happy, and that the things that you wish were true could possibly be true. And you know, a lot of it is about the story and the illusion, and it's very fun and exciting to present that to people. It is like being a storyteller in 3 dimensions.
Well, when you're telling your stories to people that are in writing, you don't get to see them, so you just picture them in your minds, right?
Right.
So who were you writing? Who were you picturing when you were writing the Timescape, which is the award-winning book that you just got from the Cygnus Award for time travel science fiction? What audience or readers were you picturing?
I don't know that I so much picture a specific audience. I just have a story to tell, and I hope that people of, you know, in every walk of life will be receptive to it. Time Lapse for me was a story that I felt was very important, because it talks about what happens when a society is taken over by extremism. And I worry that there are a lot of people today who think everything would be better if everyone just played by their personal rules and followed their personal creed. And while there are very positive things to, you know, do unto others and so forth, when it starts to get very specific, so that you want a theocratic society, or you want an autocratic society because you feel you know best and you could make people do the right thing. The danger in that, the danger in believing that would be some kind of utopia, is what I wanted to write about. This.
Wait, I didn't understand. What did you just? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you just said about the danger of believing in utopia.
The danger of believing that your particular method would create a utopia, you know what's right for everybody.
Oh, okay.
Going to play by your rules, and this is what they will believe, and this is what they will do, and this is what they will not be able to do, and then everything will be great. And
I see.
that is, of course, not the case. And our hero in time lapse has lost everything because a colleague of his has, in fact, gone back in history and changed events in a significant way, and that has caused the loss of his family and his entire world around him. And he has only one ally in this new world, and that is a young woman who is a freedom fighter, because what was supposed to be this wonderful utopia is actually now a dictatorship. And
Wow.
and many of the rights that we take for granted are gone. I think a lot of times people don't realize that their rights don't supersede someone else's. And, you know, we don't have the right to say, I believe this, therefore you must live by what I believe, and because that's my right. But it's your right to live by your beliefs. I mean, you know, assuming that we're not hurting each other and so forth. That's the essence of freedom and democracy, and it's very easy to slip away. So that was, for me, what I wanted to write a cautionary tale about.
Well, you bring up a really good point, because I am writing a series of science fiction novels, as you know, the Spanner series, and I take the position of trying to create a utopia, or at least a better future for Earth and for a lot of the people that are around Earth in a variety of situations, both political and social, and also in biology and sociology and politics that we're currently in, and the environmental problems that we're having. It seems to me that we're in a lot of trouble, and so I take the position in my books that I want to look at what would make it better. How could we really help each other, and what would anybody think would be utopian compared to this? How would it happen? And I give the aliens the power and the knowledge to help us, and then we as the humans, but also other animals on the planet, are given the choice over a 5-year period whether or not to become the members of this many worlds collective. And from what you were just saying, I can imagine that the people that are objecting to this, which I call the fragmenters and the trenchers, would have exactly that point of view, that nobody has the right to tell them what's better, nobody has the right to tell them how to live, even if it would help, we don't want it. Is that what you're saying?
No, not exactly. I think, actually, you know, with speculative fiction, one of the wonderful things about it is that there are so many viewpoints. My concern primarily was when the impulse to do the right thing slides into extremism. And I think we have a lot of issues in our world today that have come about because of whether political or religious extremists have, you know, sought to dominate everyone else. So it's interesting. If there were easy answers to some of these questions, we wouldn't just be writing books about it, it would be happening. You know, they're very difficult questions. At what point, when you impose upon people for their own good, can it slide into something else? And that is how, in time lapse, that's in a way how it begins, with what starts out as morality and a better life for people becomes contain and control. So it's a, you know, it's the thing that's good about your stories is that we have to presume the aliens know better than we do, that they've been doing this a lot longer. Unfortunately, humans tend to make a mess of things. So when all of this is coming from human beings alone, that's when we get in trouble. So maybe we need the, you know, the Rebel Alliance out there to straighten us out a little bit. We wouldn't just be
I'm getting a weird interference here.
I can hear you just fine.
Oh, good. Okay. So let's keep talking. There was just some weird interference there for a minute.
All right.
So what you were saying was so interesting to me because I think a lot of people are going to be very upset about the idea that aliens or humans would come along and tell them how to live their life. You know, they're going to think, no, I don't want anyone telling me that. I don't want you telling me that. I don't care who it is or how smart they are. I want to go make my own mistakes. I want to lead my own life. It seems like a human flaw, a really tragic flaw. Do you agree with that?
Um, yes and no. The problem is the human beings goof things up. And the best, you know, the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think that's very true. People have the best of intentions, but maybe they don't always see what the ramifications are or what that might lead to. And, you know, there's always been a lot of talk with the whole Patriot Act and those kinds of things of what do we give up to be safe. And some things, personally, I'm willing to give up some things for sure to be safe. You know, I don't mind walking through the metal detectors at the airport and so forth, though we joke that pretty soon you're only going to be allowed one item of clothing, you know. But there's no question that when people talk about things being a slippery slope, they're right. Because human beings don't seem to do very well at moderating behavior. They seem to easily slide into being convinced that they're right, so everybody else should do what they say.
Well, and some of us, and I would consider myself to be one of these people, we have a certain amount of pride, or I would even say arrogance, and I include myself in that category, where we really think we do know better.
It's
You know, and we really do believe, like, and I was listening to what you were saying earlier about, you know, that there are these religious or political extremists that have been creating problems, and a lot of people are noticing how they seem to be the most violent or the most difficult, and, you know, it's hard to disagree with that analysis on the one hand. On the other hand, if you're one of those people, you probably don't want anyone calling you that or saying what you're doing is wrong.
That's true.
You think you're really right.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I mean by human beings, you know, are very, very imperfect. And the nice thing about science fiction is that you can create beings who are more perfect than we are, and maybe they see the light better than we do. I think human beings, most human beings, unless they're mentally deranged, try for the light. I think most of us do have a moral compass and do want to do what's right, not only for ourselves but for others, and make a good world for those we love and for the people and the children that are growing up. But again, we have not seemed to always hit on the best way to do that. And you know, we argue a lot amongst ourselves about how there are a lot of things that can be accomplished by somebody simply taking over and saying, here are the rules, this is what you do, you don't do anything else. But I think there's also something in human nature that rebels against that.
So what are some of the things in your time-lapse book that you think are progressional, or things that you wish were happening in our current situation or in the near future?
The thing that motivated the young man who actually did change history, looking back through history, he saw where things went wrong, and he thought, I know how to fix that. I'm going to prevent that from happening. But the ways in which he goes about it involve crime, that you have to eliminate someone so that they will never do blah blah. And that immediately is a red flag, because that person is now accepting of ways of behaving, even though for a good end. Now he's picked a way of achieving that isn't good. And, you know, it's the old, should we go back and kill Hitler? Well, lots of us would like to do that, you know. But we don't know what the world might be had that happened. So, you know, it's nothing is easy. Nothing is ever as simple as it looks. And to me, that's very fascinating. Frustrating.
I think you bring up a good point, because I think a lot of people would agree that one change can make a huge amount of differences, and we don't know all the different changes that would be, all the ramifications, all of the consequences, right?
It's true. I always loved the Ray Bradbury story. They made a movie of it called The Butterfly Effect, in which back in time to see dinosaurs and so forth, but they have to stay on a path and they mustn't touch anything. And of course, someone ends up stepping on a butterfly, and, you know, millennia later, the whole world is different. And that's an extreme situation, but not unplausible in a way. You know, the little things matter.
Well, and you do get to this situation in actual life every moment. You know, like I talk about this in my science fiction books, but so do lots of other writers in both science fiction and regular fiction. You know, that movie they made with Gwyneth Paltrow called Sliding Doors was a takeoff on that whole idea that, you know, you get off the subway at one point, one stop at that moment, and your life goes in one direction. Don't get off at that point, you miss it, like you just don't make it out the door, or you wait for another stop or another subway car, then your life goes in another direction, and it's a completely different direction.
And you think how much life rests on small things. A choice of a class that I took in college found me my husband. You know, if I hadn't taken that class, what would my life be now? It would be totally different, right? My mother, in speaking to a bank manager at one point, said to her, "Oh, you have a southern accent. Where are you from?" It turned out that woman had lived next door to my father as a child, and when her niece came out to visit, my brother married her. And
What?
if my mother hadn't said, "Oh, you have a southern accent. Where are you from?" I wouldn't have my sister-in-law or my nieces and nephews or my great-nieces. You know, life is just full of those little moments, and you wonder sometimes, which ones did I miss? You know?
Right.
But that's the way to madness, so you can't dwell on that.
Well, have you ever read any of the Seth books Jane Roberts wrote in the 60s and 70s and 80s?
No, I'm not familiar.
He was one of the first people to claim to be channeling, if you know what that is.
Yes.
And the entity that she was channeling the most often, it named itself Seth.
Oh,
and
yes.
She wrote her own books, and then also she said Seth wrote his own book. So one of them is called Seth Speaks, and there are other ones like that. But she wrote her own, and one of the concepts they both talked about was that as you're moving through your life, there are all these fork points or junctures in which your life does split off. She was actually talking about the multiverse before anybody else was using that term or understood quantum physics was really correct, and that there are constant splinterings of the timelines that we're all living in and that we're not usually aware of them. But she was talking about that, and she says sometimes you know you've made a jump. She didn't call it a quantum jump the way Cynthia Sue Richardson talks about it, but a lot of people are talking about that as that you could look at your photo albums. Go back in time in the real world of your life and look at your photo albums and look at yourself, and then think about whether you feel like that's you or whether that picture in your past actually feels like it belongs to someone else. And she'll say, if it feels like it belonged to someone else, you've jumped. You now are not the same person who's in that photograph. That person forked off, and you forked off, and now here are you looking at that picture, which they also have, but you're in a different timeline.
I love it. Isn't that a great thing? I mean, you know, you go crazy thinking about it, but it's a wonderful idea. And in my novel Time Lapse, one thing that the young woman who's the freedom fighter says is, well, if things had ever been different, wouldn't I know about it? And our hero, who is lost in this time slip, has to say no. The only reason he does know is because he has a little device on him that he was unaware was connected to this time travel device. And he says, I remember it. Just because you don't doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right,
So,
right.
You know, it's great. You know, he has trouble even convincing her that he's not crazy, that there is an alternate history. So to me, that's just so fascinating. I love that, and I love the idea of going back and changing something that then changes everything else. I'm a big lover of time travel stories, and some of the first ones I read that were so great. Of course, there's The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. Everybody loves that one. But Jack Finney, who wrote Time and Again, and he simply goes back to the late 1800s, and he goes back by simply using his mind. There's an actual training facility in which they immerse people in a little, like set play of the time period they're going to, and they get so immersed that then they're able to go back in it, sort of like the Somewhere in Time story that Bid Time Return that Richard Matheson wrote, where it's just the power of the mind and the will. So there, you don't really have to have a time machine in some of those stories, and in fact, you know, you don't need a big explanation of how it works. People will accept that, hey, it happened, because certainly strange stuff happens, so why not this?
Well, yeah, in my books, I consider that to be one of the size skills that some people are born with a better ability to utilize right off the bat, and other people can be trained in, and some people are kind of tone deaf to it and can't really learn it so easily. But it's called time-ulting, or from simultaneous time. It comes out of that simultaneity and time-ulting, and the main character can do it all the time since she was a little girl, and lots of other people can learn to do it. But the idea is that you can recognize these multiple timelines and these multiple possibilities, and you can go backwards and forwards, because it's not really backwards and forwards, it's all simultaneous. And it's a little mind-boggling, because obviously you're living in a linear way, or babies would never be born and never would grow up, and trees wouldn't grow, and you know, if there really were no linearity, we would all be frozen in one moment all the time. So it's both and. We are all in this one moment all the time, and it's this moment, and it's this moment, and it's this moment, and we're progressing. Both.
Absolutely true.
And it's crazy to think about.
Paradox of it is great. I love it.
Yeah, and you get to read a lot about what other people think or how it would work, and that's one of the fun things about science fiction, I think, for a lot of people. You're right, is the whole idea of time travel and how that can work and what we do with it. And so besides time-lapse, do you utilize science fiction principles or mostly paranormal principles in your other books?
In the other books, it's primarily paranormal, although one of my short stories is a time travel story that is in a new anthology that just came out called Cowboy Kisses. It doesn't sound like it's time travel, but it actually is. My story's called A Kiss in Time, and it is about a young woman in the early 1900s who discovers an old diary, and the diary has the power to take her back 40-some years to the scene of a murder. And at first she can only see it as a ghostly vision playing out, but then she finds she has the ability to interact with it, and she and her new love, whose life she saves, realizes that they have a problem. Is she 43 years in the past, or is he 43 years in the future, and what are they going to do about it? So that was fun to write. That's a short story, and I enjoy the short stories because people sometimes don't have a lot of time to read, and they can read one of them in 20 minutes or half an hour, and you know, they don't have to end up stopping in the middle and forgetting what was going on and so forth. So those have been very enjoyable for me. We also have a 2-year-old at home, so right now my time to crank out another novel is somewhat limited. So the short stories this last year or so have worked out very well for me.
So you have one of your children and one of your grandchildren living in your home with you and your husband right now?
Yes.
Oh, how
That was
fun
the
is
daughter
that?
you saw a while ago going back and forth.
Yep, yep, that's really great.
Yeah,
Well, there's a lot of multi-generational family units connecting in the later parts of their lives, and sometimes it's really difficult, and sometimes it's really great, and sometimes it's both.
it can be both. We're fortunate that we generally get along very well,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know my own grandparents very much. One of them passed away before I was even born. So my parents were older, and so it's really been a wonderful thing for me to be able to know my grandchildren. They all live nearby, and of course the little one lives with us, and for them to know us, because I did not have that pleasure growing up, and I wish I had had. Now I think of all the things I would have asked.
Well, we are really getting some great conversation going here, and one of our listeners, I can't put up the comment because the comment track isn't working, but Nicole Levach just said that she's listening in and loving our conversation, and thank you, Nicole, for doing that, because we've had some trouble with our tech this morning, and I think we might have lost some viewers, so thank you for finding us. And Charles Dunkley has also found us and is listening in, hasn't made a comment, but thanks, Charles, for visiting and listening. We are going to continue a little bit over the hour because we started late, and I want to give the full hour to Lorrie so that people who watch later, you will get a full 60-minute Changes experience. It just won't start and stop from, if you're on the clock, 9 to 10 o'clock Central Time or 10 to 11 Eastern Time. So back to our conversation, what I wanted to also bring up with you is you've been talking about your cowboy stories and your paranormal stories and your science fiction stories, and you contribute short stories, you write novels, so you have a lot of different writing components to your professional life. And how is it to be a cross-genre writer and to write in more than one size? Like, you don't just write novels, you also write short stories. So how is all that working for you?
Right now it's working wonderfully. 15 or so years ago, when I first wrote the first draft of one of my novels, the editors did not like it one bit. And it was, wait a minute, they have to make love on page 160, and wait a minute, no one reads paranormal. You know, what's a paranormal element doing in your Western romance? And that was very frustrating to me. So I think now people are much more receptive. People realize life is complicated, and it doesn't just follow one track. I write the stories that I would like to hear myself, that have things in them that I'm interested in. And I just like to think, no matter how the story sets out or what time frame it's in or who the characters are, there's a lot of stuff that just might possibly happen, you know, that, you know, like Hamlet said, are not dreamed of in our philosophy, right?
There's more to heaven and earth than we can
Exactly.
imagine. Right. Well, you know, one thing I'm really going to put you on the spot here, and you can totally back out of it if you want. But people ask me this all the time, so I'm going to turn the tables. What part of the story that you're writing is your story in any of these books? Like, do you and your husband communicate telepathically? Or did you meet in any of the ways that any of these people met up? Or do you have friends that any of this happened to? Like, how much can you tell us about the source of your stories?
Oh, well, first of all, no, we do not communicate telepathically. I would love to be able to send him my honey-do list, you know, but it doesn't work that way. And even if I could, he'd ignore me anyway, so quiet, I'm doing something else. Bless his heart. He is a wonderful guy, though. He is my cover designer. He's my video trailer designer. He's a wonderfully talented man, so I got to say that.
Okay, big shout out to Wallace Farrelly. Thank you, Wallace.
Yeah, he is, and we've been married, oh my God, it's going to be 44 years come June. So
Mazel tov.
He's a good guy. I was a very lucky girl, because when I was 19, all I thought was, oh, he's cute. You know, that was my criteria. So you're right.
Awful. I know you do get lucky. It's really true.
But anyway.
So you don't know any teenage boys that are time traveling? I'm so disappointed.
I know. Well, really, some of the things that influenced me, first of all, we talked about the wonderful writers from when I was a kid on the Twilight Zone. I mean, you look back at who those people were, Ray Bradbury, Earl Hamner Jr., Charles Beaumont, Richard Matheson, and of course Rod Serling. These people were fabulous writers and authors, and that they were all in this one place, and I got exposed to them. People thought, oh, they're just writing, fantastic stories or scary stories. They really weren't. They were writing about us as human beings, about the things that you and I write about. What if, an alien race could improve us? What if we thought they were improving us and they weren't? The old "to serve man" one,
Oh, yes, you have right to stop that.
Yeah, you got to watch out for those greater intelligences.
Okay, wait, we have to tell people who are too young or who aren't from this country or who never saw the Twilight Zone, what does that reference mean, to serve man? Do you want to take it and explain it?
Yes, the story was that this superior alien race had come to Earth and had explained that they were here for the benefit of mankind. They spoke before the UN. They had a huge book called "To Serve Man," and they said that this was just their primary purpose, what they wanted to do. And gradually people began taking trips to the planet, and it was come tour in our planet. And at the very end, the code of the book at the translation is broken, and the big line is, "To serve man, it's a cookbook." So obviously they did not have our best interests at heart, other than fattening us up.
Well, the most haunting scene from that book, and thank you for that summary, is the alien, who looked very human, by the way. The aliens are standing there with this podium that has "To Serve Man" on the podium, and you can see the cover, and then it's lying there. And these people are all lined up to get onto their spaceship, right? All these humans are lined up to get on their spaceship, all looking happy, right? And then you notice, or you hear, oh, it's a cookbook. And the episode ends. That's where it ends.
Yep. And they're stuck. Well and good.
They're taking all these people to put into their big pot.
Right. And even though, a lot of the episodes, the monsters are due on Maple Street, in which the aliens arrive and they say, well, all we had to do was make their lawnmowers not work, and they turned on each other.
Yes.
And, the stories were about what our failings are as human beings and what our strengths are as human beings, how we love and what scares us, and it just spoke to humanity. And I think as a teen, I was just starting to be able to understand some of those themes, and it just hit me. Of course, I didn't know how brilliant those writers were at the time.
Right.
I was so astounded that I actually got the message, and that has stayed with me. My other big influence, my dad was born in 1909, and people in 1909 were not much different than people in 1865, and he had come from the Deep South. He was a U.S. Naval officer. He'd gone to Annapolis, but he also was a good old Georgia boy, and the clash of cultures just in this one person was very interesting. He was the only one of his family who had left Georgia. So he had seen the world, and he was a very bright man. And one of the things he always told me was that he loved the Old West. And he said, if I hadn't been in the Navy and if I had been born a few years earlier, by golly, I'd have ridden shotgun with Wild Bill Hickok. So he loved Westerns, and not the kind of revisionist ones that are so gloomy, like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, where everyone dies, and but and they all have terrible lives. But the old ones where, the hero cowboy rode the range, and it was an exciting and place to be, and full of possibilities.
A big adventure. It was a big adventure to go west.
I didn't realize, I had found some old family documents that I had never heard anything about. I had a great-grandfather who fought for the Confederacy. And when the Confederacy was defeated, those men were considered prisoners of war.
Right.
They had to be paroled. They were paroled as prisoners of war if they signed an oath of allegiance. If they didn't do that, their property was taken and so forth, which, you know, let's face it, you back the losing side, and it's not going to go so well for you.
Right.
But I thought at the time because I found these documents that he had signed, swearing that he would never again take up arms against the United States, which is a pretty weird thing to find, you know. So I thought, well, how would you feel if you've been defeated, you've been at war 4 years, you've lost your home, you've lost your family, and now is this the ultimate humiliation, or is it a relief that you can start your life over again and you can leave that behind? And in my first novel, Terms of Surrender, that is the situation that the main male character faces. And he keeps that document, and when he's asked why, someone is reading it to him, and he says, "You don't have to read it to me, I know what it says." And the other person says, "Well, why do you keep it?" And he says, "It may not be a comfort to remember, but it's not a comfort to forget either."
Oh, that's a good way to think about it.
I really like complexities in people and how things are complicated.
Right.
Things are complicated. And, you know, and we see the ramifications of that conflict today. People still, you know, let's face it, the Confederacy is still there in many ways.
Well, you know, Nicole wanted to insert herself, I think, into our Twilight Zone conversation, saying that she loved those authors and writers, and she agrees with you that all of those stories really were stretching us as humans. And I think when you find family history like that, you would be expanding on what Nicole is saying and really bringing in the idea that we learn from our own history as well.
Yes.
And whatever our ancestors went through that we know about. You know, I come from 4 generations of Jewish people living in this country, but the reason that we had to live in this country is we were escaping the pogroms that were trying to obliterate the Jews in the late 1800s in Russia and the countries right around Russia. And so we came out of there, and a lot of them came to St. Louis and Chicago and Louisville. Those are where my ancestors all settled. Louisville, Kentucky, Louisville, if you don't know how to say it. And a lot of people would then say, "Oh, but you're just American." But, you know, World War II came along, and our families certainly didn't feel American. We felt very Jewish.
Yes.
And we were very keenly aware of how dangerous it was to be Jewish at that time, and would have been even more dangerous if we'd been German. But our name was German. Fleischmann was my birth name. And so a lot of people were very worried about how we were going to be treated. And there's still a huge upsurge right now, as you know, in anti-Semitism in Europe, in France especially, and in Germany. And it's hugely frightening. There's an immigration movement here that's reminiscent of all that. And maybe they aren't targeting Jews, but they're targeting anyone they think is different from them.
Yes.
And it's terrible. It's very upsetting to me as a person.
When will they ever learn? I mean, humans seem to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again and suffer for the same idiotic reasons.
Right, and where does any white person in this country get off to being righteous about not wanting immigrants? We're all immigrants.
Absolutely.
Not one of us was born here, ancestrally speaking. So it's ridiculous, and it's offensive.
It's like they've forgotten, or maybe they never knew. Do you not even know your own history? You know, people seem, you know, so ignorant.
Well, what really opened my eyes to the racism of it all and how socially constructed the idea of race is came from 2 people I studied with for my doctorate and master's who were originally in Australia and now they're in Illinois, and Mary Kalantzis and Bill Cope. And they were talking to me and my fellow students about in Australia, the definition of who is white and who isn't white is much more narrow than it is here. So, for example, she's Greek, and in Australia, Greek people are not white. Italian people are not white. Lebanese and other people from the Middle East are not white. It doesn't matter what they look like. They're not considered white, and they're not given the same respect or privileges or status that white people in Australia are given. And then if you look at the history of Australia, where did most of the white people in Australia come from? The prison boats.
Exactly.
So where do they get out acting all superior? They
And
were
of course,
prisoners or they were guards. That's
and
all.
sent to America, you know, the Irish that were sent to America, they were, you know, all the signs that said no Irish need apply. You know, there's
Right.
always someone that the people who are already there think, oh, they're not as good as I am because I'm already here, so now it's mine.
Right.
Look,
Look, I love this conversation, but we are having a weird time lapse here where we started late, but we don't want to end really late. And so I'm going to say that this is a quarter of the hour, even though it really is actually almost 10 o'clock my time, Central time. But we're going to give our last 10 minutes to you, Lorrie Farrelly, to answer my question that I ask all of my changes guests, which is, given all of the local, personal, political, social, regional, statewide, global, environmental, climactic, and any other kinds of changes you're aware of, which ones are arousing you hope or fear, and which ones would you like to talk about right now? Take it away, Lorrie Farrelly.
all right, thank you, Sally. I'd like to speak about hope because maybe I'm just an optimistic person, but I have a lot of hope for the future and for our world, in spite of the terrible things that are happening, have happened, and have happened all the way through human history. I realize that element may never go away. But I look at, from having been a teacher and now as a grandmother, I look at young people, kids and teens and young adults, and I see really encouraging things. I see young people who are accepting of each other far more than perhaps even one generation back was. That they do not see as many barriers between people as we do, and I think partly that's the result of how wired they are. They're tuned into everybody all over the world. You know, they're YouTube and think I'm not nearly up on everything, but they are. And now, because you can speak to someone somewhere else in the world instantly, they do it. And I know sometimes you think, oh, they're doing it too much when you see them sitting at the Thanksgiving table and everybody under 40 is on their cell phone, you know, and they're showing it to each other. But nevertheless, they have a global understanding that we're all human, that I think is really unique in the history of human beings. They have that more than any generation that's gone before, and they are more open to other people, other cultures. They see them as people and not as some weird other. And I think that's a huge step forward for humanity. It gives me a great deal of hope. And I think of kids now really as the light of the future, because they are. And, you know, there was a time when we thought, those of us who were, you know, in college in the 60s and 70s, we thought we were going to be it, you know, we were so counterculture and everything. But the truth of it is, we still didn't see people as not other. We were accepting of the other, but we still saw people as other. These kids today don't see people as other. They just see everybody as human, and I think that is a tremendous step forward. As far as what frightens me, we won't mention Congress. But that should frighten anybody. But and there have always been, you know, the fools on the hill, and, you know, I shouldn't say that because I do have respect for our government, but, you know, they get some odd people up there, and it's you do worry sometimes that the weirdness is going to take over, and so I always worry about that. You know, are there enough people in the country, in the world, you know, that aren't going to be swayed by fear-mongering, that aren't going to be swayed by propaganda, that are going to try to see things, see the truth of things. And I hope that we will have enough people that truth will somehow prevail through all the ridiculousness that we also see. So I do fear sometimes that it may not be, that it might get lost. But I do have faith in humanity. I have faith in who we are as a people. I have faith in my fellow human beings mostly. Don't know that I would have much faith if I were captured by ISIS, but hopefully that won't happen. But I do, I do think, like Anne Frank, that at heart most people are good. And she certainly had plenty of cause to think otherwise. So how she clung to her hope in the face of all that she experienced, I don't know, but she did, and I would hope that I would follow her example. So she's one of my heroes. She really is.
That's great. That is very inspiring, and I would certainly be intrigued to follow up on a lot of the things you just said. One of them, I was reminded of the way that I handled some of those things about Congress. In my series, I decided to make the new leadership group that was going to run the planet be comprised entirely of leaders who didn't want to be included, who had never run for office, who weren't volunteering, who didn't see it as a high status or powerful place to be. And those reluctant leaders are the ones that I wanted to put forward as leaders, because they would be the least corruptible and the least self-aggrandizing and the least involved in their ego driving them to do it, which I saw was at least a start at having a different kind of leader than the kinds we've been having.
I absolutely agree. I think that's brilliant. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. That is exactly the person who, should be leading. And these days, too, when in order to lead, you have to have multi-millions of dollars, and most people don't, so you have to sell yourself to somebody who has multi-millions of dollars. I think you're absolutely right that the real the leader that we need is the one who is not interested in that.
Is not really putting themselves forward, that is actually kind of put forward by other people's good opinions of them and by their natural leadership in certain contexts, but that they aren't volunteering, they aren't running. I think you're right about the problem being money, too, and I haven't addressed that in my books yet, but I will, because I think I've left that out on purpose. I just have been involved in so many other parts. My books are really complicated, so can't talk about everything in every volume, but I plan to have 10, so I'll have a chance to talk about each part at some point. So thanks for reminding me. So let's give ourselves a few minutes now to remind people of how to reach you and what's coming up for you in the near future.
All right. I'm on Facebook. I have an author page on Facebook. You just go to Lorrie Farrelly author, and I'm on Amazon.
Let me spell that out. Let me spell that out for people that are just listening. It's Lorrie, and Farrelly has 2 R's and 2 L's, so Farrelly.
Right, Farrell with a Y on the end. And I'm on Amazon. All my books are on Amazon, and they are available all as paperbacks and ebooks, and some of them are available also as audiobooks, and you can access all of that through Amazon. And I'm around everywhere on Google and LinkedIn, and I'm always as Lorrie Farrelly, so I use my real name, and I hope that readers will connect with me, because I love to hear from people.
And you said you have a new short story coming into a new anthology for Prairie Rose Publishers?
A new anthology coming out in the summer called A Cowboy Celebration. It's going to be around the 4th of July.
A cowboy apostrophe S?
No, just a cowboy, no S. A Cowboy Celebration, no S after cowboy. And the book that was just released has the one called Cowboy Kisses, has the story A Kiss in Time. There is also a Halloween book called Cowboys, Creatures, and Calico, which I absolutely love the title of, and that also has a time travel story called The Sheriff of Hellengone. And so I hope some of you will look for those. They are through Prairie Rose Publishing. They are on my Amazon page. And if you enjoy short stories, I'm with some wonderful writers there. I'm very humbled to be in their company, and I think you will enjoy all of the stories. They're all different, and there's some pretty amazing tales in those books.
Oh, that's great. I think that's really great, and I hope that people will go and find those and learn more about how you combine the paranormal and the Western and the romance and the sci-fi speculative fiction elements in a unique way that I think is really original and has a lot going for it. I have enjoyed dipping into some of your books on the parts that you give for previews, and I read into the time-lapse book, and I was really mad that the preview ended.
Oh.
And I'm going to have to go read the whole book.
Oh, that's wonderful news. I'm so glad you were mad.
Well,
I get that too.
I'm going to say this because people who know me and who've been reading my blog are well aware of this. I'm a very picky reader at this point in my life. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of patience. And I've read so many tens of thousands of books in my life that I am very, very particular. So if I read the first 10 or 20 or 30 pages and I keep reading, it's a miracle. Because mostly I don't.
That's a very high compliment, and I much appreciate it. That I hope is what my books do, that they do grab people's interest. And you know, you don't have to be any particular sort of person to enjoy them, really, I hope. And I loved writing them. So
oh, good. Well, we have a visitor, Rain Dowell. Rain Dowell has been to lots of my changes episodes. Thanks, Rain, for coming today. And she says The Sheriff of Hellengone sounds like a great read, so she might go look for that when she has a chance. And thanks for visiting, Rain. We had some technical problems, and so we're going over past the hour because we started late, and I want to give everybody the full hour. And we also had to move to a new URL, so I hope people found us, and we're going to fix all that on YouTube and everywhere. And it is time for us to end now. So I want to thank you, Lorrie, for hanging in there with all of the weird technical snafus we had. And for all of your great topics and conversation. You've been a wonderful guest. And nobody would know that it was your first hangout because you're a natural. You should do this a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Sally. Let me tell you, this was worth getting up at 5 a.m. for. Absolutely. I had a great time. I'm on the West Coast, so I had a great time. I so enjoyed talking with you. I'm loving reading. I'm reading your first story in the Spanners series, This Changes Everything. And you said about grabbing. It grabbed me right away. I love it. So I can't wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone who found us during the live viewing and stuck with us. And everyone who didn't find us during the live viewing, you can find this on YouTube and on the event page. And the old event page will send you to the new event page. So you'll find us eventually, and it will stay up as episode 23 on YouTube as long as YouTube exists. So thank you, YouTube, and thank you, Google+. I want to remind everybody that Changes usually happens on Wednesdays, 10 o'clock Eastern Time for an hour. And it is a conversation between authors, not an interview. And it is free-form and live and PG-13 rated, but otherwise it is unpredictable. Next week, we have my first full-time poet coming on, James Gordon, who calls himself the greatest living poet. And I'm excited to find out what he means by that. I know he does a lot of performing his poetry, and his website, just to warn you, is not PG-13. A lot of his poetry and his website are very much R, or some people might even consider it X. But our conversation will be PG-13. He's promised me that, and I believe him. So thank you to everybody. I hope to see you sometime in the future on one of our shows when the comment tracker is actually working. Thank you again, Lorrie. And we're going to sign off now. And I will say to everybody, I hope you do well with your changes.